The grand halls of the Zirin Imperial Palace were unlike anything Commander Ethan Voss had ever seen. Towering pillars stretched toward the ceiling, carved with symbols of an alien language he could not read. The air was filled with a strange but pleasant fragrance, and soft golden lights illuminated the vast chamber where a diplomatic banquet was about to begin. Ethan adjusted the formal military uniform he had been given for this meeting. He was Earth's representative, chosen for his experience in dealing with alien cultures. The Zirin Empire was one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy, and this negotiation was important. After years of conflict, there was finally a chance for peace between humans and Zirin. At the center of the hall stood Queen Seraphis, the ruler of the Zirin. She was tall, graceful, and imposing. Her deep violet eyes examined Ethan with curiosity. Zirin were humanoid, but had distinct features: smooth dark blue skin, silver hair that shimmered under the lights, and elegant, crown-like ridges on their heads. Unlike humans, they rarely showed emotions. "You are the first human to step inside my palace," Queen Seraphis said, her voice calm but powerful. "Let us see if your people are worthy of peace." Ethan nodded respectfully. "I'm honored to be here, Your Majesty. I hope this meeting strengthens the future between our species." A long table was prepared for the banquet, filled with alien dishes from across the Zirin Empire. Ethan had been briefed on Zirin food customs, but as he looked at the plates of unfamiliar meals, he still felt uncertain. Beside him, an aide whispered, "Commander, be careful what you eat. Some Zirin foods react differently to human biology." Ethan nodded and took a small portion of a golden, jelly-like fruit that looked the least dangerous. He noticed Queen Seraphis watching him closely. "You may try the royal nectar, Commander," she said, gesturing toward a crystalline goblet filled with a glowing blue liquid. "It is the rarest delicacy in our empire." Ethan hesitated. He had been trained to handle alien customs carefully, and refusing a gift from a monarch could be seen as an insult. Slowly, he lifted the goblet and took a sip. The moment the liquid touched his tongue, a strange warmth spread through his body. His vision blurred for a second, and his heart pounded in his chest. A wave of murmurs spread across the room. The Zirin nobles exchanged surprised glances, and even Seraphis's usually emotionless face showed a flicker of shock and intrigue. "What was that?" Ethan asked, setting the goblet down. He felt fine, but something in the atmosphere had changed. Seraphis stared at him, her violet eyes filled with an intensity he didn't understand. "You consumed something no non-Zirin has ever taken before." Ethan frowned. "Is that bad?" The queen didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stood from her throne and stepped closer, her towering figure making him feel strangely small. "I need to speak with my advisors," she said, immediately. Before Ethan could ask more, Seraphis turned and walked away, her long, flowing robe trailing behind her. The nobles whispered among themselves, their expressions ranging from excitement to concern. Ethan looked toward his aide, confused. "What just happened?" The aide shook his head. "I don't know, Commander, but whatever it was, it changed everything." The banquet ended abruptly, and Ethan was escorted to a luxurious guest chamber inside the palace. The room was elegant, with smooth silver walls and soft, glowing lights embedded into the ceiling. A strange energy lingered in the air, making him feel restless. Hours passed before a royal guard arrived at his door. "The Queen summons you," the guard said. Ethan followed him through the palace corridors until they reached a private chamber. Inside, Queen Seraphis was waiting, along with her chief advisors. Their expressions were serious. "Commander Ethan," Seraphis said, her voice softer than before, "we have conducted tests, and the results are impossible." Ethan crossed his arms. "What results?" The queen took a deep breath. Then, to his complete shock, she spoke words he never expected to hear. "You got me pregnant, human." Silence filled the room. Ethan's mind struggled to process what he had just heard. "Wait, what?" He finally managed to say, "That's not possible." Seraphiz's violet eyes held a mixture of excitement and curiosity. It shouldn't be. And yet, it is. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. What had he gotten himself into? Ethan Voss stood frozen, his mind struggling to process Queen Seraphiz's words. "You got me pregnant, human." The statement echoed in his head, but it made no sense. He hadn't done anything. He had only attended a diplomatic meeting, followed every rule, and drank the royal nectar, the strange glowing liquid she had offered. Finally, Ethan found his voice. "Your Majesty, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Seraphiz's violet eyes gleamed with something he couldn't place: curiosity, fascination, and something else. "I understand your confusion, Commander," she said, stepping forward, "but my advisors have confirmed it. Something happened when you consumed the royal nectar." One of the Queen's chief advisors, an elderly Zirin scientist, spoke next. "The royal nectar is not just a drink. It is sacred. It carries the essence of the Zirin royal bloodline. Only those who are biologically compatible with the Queen can trigger its true effect." Ethan frowned. "And what exactly is that effect?" The scientist hesitated before answering. "It initiates a bonding process, one that leads to reproduction." Ethan's heart pounded. "That's impossible. Humans and Zirin aren't even the same species." Seraphiz nodded. "That is what we always believed. But the nectar has never reacted this way before. Not with any Zirin male. Not with anyone." Ethan rubbed his forehead, feeling a growing sense of unease. "So, what does this mean?" The Queen tilted her head slightly. "It means that somehow human DNA is compatible with mine. It means that you, Ethan Voss, have done something no other being in the galaxy has ever done." Ethan exhaled, trying to keep his mind calm and logical. "All right, let's say, for a moment, that this is true. What happens now?" Seraphiz exchanged glances with her advisors before speaking again. "In Zirin culture, the one who fathers the royal heir must stand by the Queen's side." Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, you mean?" The scientist nodded. "You are now bound to Queen Seraphiz. By Zirin law, you have a duty to protect and support her." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. This was insane. He had come here for a peace treaty, and now they were telling him he was somehow responsible for the next ruler of the Zirin Empire. He shook his head. "This has to be a mistake. I need to run my own tests. I need proof." Seraphiz gave him a knowing look. "You may examine the results yourself, but our technology does not lie." Before Ethan could respond, a loud beeping sound interrupted them. A guard rushed in, his expression serious. "Your Majesty, an urgent message from the High Command," the guard announced. Seraphiz turned to him. "Speak." The guard's voice was tense. "A faction of the Zirin nobility has rejected the news of the Queen's pregnancy. They say it is unnatural and claim that the child cannot be a true heir." Ethan's stomach dropped. He had been around politics long enough to know what this meant. "This is bad, isn't it?" he asked. Seraphiz's expression was unreadable. "It means that there are those who would oppose my rule. And if they cannot stop me, they may try to stop you." Ethan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just a biological mystery anymore. This was a political crisis. Seraphiz faced him directly, her voice calm but firm. "Commander Ethan Voss, whether you accept it or not, your fate is now tied to mine. And if we are to survive, we must stand together." Ethan exhaled. He had come here for peace. Instead, he had just become the center of an intergalactic storm. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to process everything. He had come to the Zirin homeworld as a diplomat, hoping to secure a peace treaty between their species. Now he was being told that he had somehow fathered the Queen's child, and worse, that this news had put both of them in danger. He turned to Seraphiz, her violet eyes watching him closely. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind. If what you're saying is true, then what's our next move? Seraphis gave a small nod, approving of his response. First, we must ensure your safety. The nobility who oppose my rule will not act openly. Not yet. But they will try to remove you from the picture. Ethan exhaled sharply. Assassins. The Queen's chief advisor, the elderly Zirin scientist, nodded gravely. It is possible, and if they cannot eliminate you, they may try to challenge the legitimacy of the child. Ethan rubbed his temples. This was getting worse by the second. A guard stepped forward. Your Majesty, should we increase security? Seraphis hesitated. No. If we react too strongly, it will confirm our enemy's fears. We must move carefully. She then turned to Ethan. For now, you will stay in the royal chambers under my protection. Ethan wasn't thrilled about being trapped in a palace with no control over the situation, but he understood the logic. Fine, he said, but I want access to your medical facilities. If I'm involved in this, I need to understand how. The Queen nodded. You will have full access. A deadly warning. Ethan followed Seraphis and her guards through the gleaming corridors of the palace. The architecture was unlike anything on Earth. Tall, curved walls glowing with bioluminescent energy, intricate carvings depicting Zirin history, and floating platforms instead of staircases. As they neared the Queen's private chambers, a sudden explosion shook the palace. Get down, one of the guards shouted. Ethan instinctively dropped to the ground, shielding Seraphis. Smoke and debris filled the air, alarms blaring across the palace. The royal guards drew their weapons, forming a defensive circle around their queen. Ethan coughed, his ears ringing. What the hell was that? A guard checked a nearby control panel. A detonation in the West Wing, Your Majesty. No casualties, but it was clearly a message. Seraphis' expression hardened. They are moving faster than I expected. Ethan stood, brushing dust from his uniform. So, someone just tried to kill us. One of the guards pointed to the damaged wall. There, scorched into the stone, were words written in the Zirin language. Seraphis read them aloud, her voice cold. The throne must remain pure. Remove the outsider. Ethan clenched his fists. This wasn't just about tradition. It was about power. He turned to Seraphis. They're not going to stop, are they? She met his gaze, her expression unreadable. No, and that is why you must survive. Ethan exhaled, his mind racing. If he wanted to make it out of this alive, he would have to stop thinking like a diplomat and start thinking like a soldier. The palace walls still trembled from the explosion, smoke lingering in the air as alarms blared across the royal corridors. Someone had just tried to send a message, one written in fire and destruction. Ethan stood beside Seraphis, his fists clenched. The throne must remain pure. Remove the outsider. He had been in dangerous situations before, during military operations, diplomatic negotiations on hostile planets. But this was different. This was personal. Someone wanted him gone, and they weren't afraid to make a move. Seraphis turned to her guards. Find out who did this. I want names, and I want them now. The lead guard saluted. Yes, Your Majesty. He and his team disappeared down the corridor, leaving Ethan alone with Seraphis and her chief advisor. Ethan exhaled, still trying to process everything. So, what now? We wait for another explosion. Or do we actually do something? Seraphis' expression was unreadable. We cannot move blindly, Ethan. Whoever is behind this has influence. If we strike too soon, we will not find the true enemy. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. So what, we just sit here and hope I don't get vaporized? Seraphis stepped closer, lowering her voice. No, we need information. And I know where to get it. The shadow market. An hour later, Ethan found himself wearing a disguise. Dark Zirin robes with a hood that concealed most of his face. He followed Seraphis through the lower levels of the city, far from the shining golden towers of the palace. Where exactly are we going? Ethan whispered as they walked through a narrow alley. To someone who trades in secrets, Seraphis said. The Shadow Market. Ethan had heard of it. An underground network of spies, informants, and smugglers. The Zirin government officially denied its existence, but everyone knew it was real. They stopped in front of a dimly lit entrance. A Zirin male, his skin a deep shade of blue, blocked the doorway. He had cybernetic implants along his arms, his glowing yellow eyes scanning them. No outsiders, he growled. Seraphis pulled back her hood slightly, revealing just enough of her face. You will let us in. The guard's eyes widened as recognition dawned. Without another word, he stepped aside. Ethan smirked. Must be nice having that kind of power. Seraphis gave him a sideways glance. It has its uses. They entered a dark chamber filled with whispering voices, dim lights casting shadows across the room. Holographic displays flickered, showing encrypted messages and illegal transactions. Merchants sold rare alien technology, and spies exchanged information for credits. At the far end, a Zirin woman sat on a cushioned chair, her piercing silver eyes locking onto Seraphis. She was known as Vela, the Shadow Broker. Well, Vela purred. To what do I owe the honor, Your Majesty? Seraphis didn't waste time. I need information. Someone tried to kill me and my companion. Vela's gaze flickered to Ethan. She smirked. Ah, the human. The one everyone's whispering about. The father of the impossible hair. Ethan crossed his arms. I take it you know who's behind the attack. Vela chuckled. I know many things, but knowledge is not free. Seraphis reached into her cloak and tossed a small metallic chip onto the table. A royal credit marker, enough to buy silence from the entire High Council. Vela's fingers danced over the chip, verifying its value. She nodded. Very well. There is a faction within the nobility. The Order of the Pure Blood. They believe that only Zirin-born heirs can rule. They see your child as a threat, Your Majesty. Ethan tensed. How many of them are we dealing with? Vela leaned back, considering. Enough to make this dangerous. They have allies in the military, spies in the palace, and I hear whispers that an assassin has already been hired. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. An assassin. Vela nodded. A professional. One of the deadliest in the galaxy. And their target is you. Ethan exhaled slowly. Well, that's just fantastic. Seraphis' expression darkened. Who is the assassin? Vela hesitated. No one knows their real name, but they go by the Ghostblade. Ethan exchanged a glance with Seraphis. Whoever this assassin was, they wouldn't stop until the job was done. Ethan sighed. Great, so now I'm being hunted by a mysterious assassin while half the nobility wants me dead. Anything else I should know? Vela smirked. Just one thing, human. You'd better start running. The air inside the palace was thick with tension. Ethan wasn't just an outsider anymore. He was a target. After their meeting with Vela, Seraphis had doubled the security around Ethan. Guards followed him wherever he went. But even with the extra protection, he knew one thing for certain. If the assassin wanted him dead, they would find a way. Ethan sat in Seraphis' private chambers, his back against the cool stone wall. Across from him, Seraphis paced, her expression unreadable. We need a plan, Ethan said, breaking the silence. Waiting around for this Ghostblade to make a move isn't exactly my idea of survival. Seraphis stopped pacing and looked at him. I have already sent my spies to track the assassin, but Ghostblade has never been caught before. Ethan smirked. Great, that's reassuring. Seraphis ignored his sarcasm. If we cannot find them first, we must force them to reveal themselves. Ethan raised an eyebrow. And how exactly do we do that? Seraphis' golden eyes locked onto his. We set a trap. The bait. Ethan didn't like the plan. In fact, he hated it. Standing on the palace balcony, he felt completely exposed. The plan was simple. Act like he wasn't being guarded, make himself an easy target, and wait for the assassin to take the bait. Of course, Seraphis had hidden soldiers watching from the shadows, ready to strike. But still, Ethan didn't trust luck. The city below was alive with lights, the golden spires of Zirin's capital glowing against the night sky. A cold wind brushed against his skin as he pretended to enjoy the view. Then he felt it. A presence. Something was wrong. His instincts screamed at him to move, and just as he turned, he caught a glimpse of something. A flicker of movement, a shadow in the dark. And then it happened. A blade sliced through the air. Ethan barely dodged in time, the sharp edge cutting through his jacket. He stumbled backward, his heart pounding. The assassin had arrived. The Ghostblade strikes. A figure dropped from above, landing silently on the balcony railing. The Ghostblade. Ethan's eyes widened. The assassin wore a sleek, dark suit that absorbed the light, making them look like a living shadow. A mask covered their face, revealing only two piercing silver eyes. Ethan reached for his weapon, but before he could react, the assassin vanished. No sound, no movement, then pain. A sharp impact struck Ethan's ribs, sending him stumbling back. The Ghostblade had moved faster than he could see. He rolled to the side as another attack came, the assassin's blade slicing through the air, where his head had been a second ago. This wasn't a normal opponent. This was someone who had trained their entire life for one thing: killing. Ethan knew he couldn't win this fight with brute strength. He had to be smart. Gritting his teeth, he pretended to stagger toward the edge of the balcony. He wanted the assassin to think he was weak. The Ghostblade didn't hesitate. They lunged forward, aiming for his heart. But Ethan was ready. At the last second, he twisted, using the assassin's own momentum against them. He grabbed their wrists and yanked forward, throwing them off balance. The mistake. The assassin recovered instantly, flipping midair and landing gracefully on the balcony railing. They tilted their heads slightly, as if reassessing him. Then they spoke. "You are not as slow as I expected, human." The voice was calm, almost amused. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "Yeah, well, I like to surprise people." The assassin stepped forward, but before they could attack again, an energy blast struck the railing beside them. Seraphis's guards had arrived. The assassin hissed in annoyance and leaped back, disappearing into the shadows. "Stop them!" Seraphis's voice rang out as her soldiers rushed onto the balcony. But it was too late. The Ghostblade was gone. Ethan sat in the royal chambers later that night, his ribs aching from the fight. Seraphis stood nearby, her expression unreadable. "You fought well," she said finally. Ethan let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, well, I'd rather not do it again." Seraphis's gaze darkened. "You will have to. The Ghostblade never fails a mission. They will return." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Great, so I'm officially on their kill list." Seraphis nodded. "But you are not alone. We will be ready." Ethan met her gaze. For the first time, he wasn't just an outsider caught in a dangerous game. He was part of something bigger. And if the Ghostblade was coming back, then he would be ready too. Seraphis had arranged for a secret meeting in one of the underground chambers of the palace. Ethan followed her down the dimly lit corridors, his hand resting near his weapon. The walls were lined with ancient carvings, depicting battles from centuries ago. At the end of the hallway, they reached a heavily guarded door. The guards saluted Seraphis and stepped aside. Inside, a figure was waiting. Vela. The informant sat at a small table, her reptilian eyes flickering in the dim light. Her long, scaled fingers tapped against the wood as she studied Ethan. "So," she said, her voice smooth, "you survived." Ethan smirked. "For now." Seraphis stepped forward. "Tell us what you found." Vela leaned back, her expression unreadable. "The Ghostblade is not working alone. Someone powerful ordered your death. Human. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. Who? Vela exhaled slowly. The High Council of Zirin. The room fell silent. Seraphis stiffened. That is not possible. Vela tilted her head. Is it not? Think about it. Ethan's presence here is dangerous. The High Council fears what his survival means. Ethan frowned. You're saying they think I'm some kind of threat? Vela nodded. You bonded with the Queen. Your child will have a claim to the throne. There are many who do not want that to happen. Ethan's chest tightened. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about Seraphis, about their unborn child. Seraphis's voice was sharp. If the High Council has betrayed me, they will answer for it. Vela shook her head. No, the Ghostblade is still out there. If you want to stop them, you need to act fast. Ethan exhaled. So what do we do? Vela's lips curled into a smirk. We make the hunter become the hunted. The plan. Ethan adjusted the hidden earpiece as he moved through the empty halls of the palace. The plan was risky, but it was their only option. Seraphis had arranged a false meeting in the council chambers, spreading rumors that Ethan would be traveling alone. The goal was simple: draw the assassin out and force them to reveal themselves. Ethan wasn't exactly thrilled about being bait again, but this time he wasn't unarmed. A dagger rested at his belt, and Seraphis's guards were hidden in the shadows. As he reached the center of the chamber, the silence was heavy. Too heavy. Then, a whisper of movement. Ethan's instincts screamed at him, and he spun just in time. A blade cutting through the air. He dodged, rolling to the side as the Ghostblade struck again. But this time, Ethan was ready. He caught the assassin's wrist and twisted, forcing the blade away. The Ghostblade reacted instantly, using Ethan's own momentum to flip over him and land gracefully on the floor. Ethan raised his weapon, breathing hard. Not so easy this time, huh? The Ghostblade didn't respond. Instead, they reached up and pulled off their mask. Ethan's breath caught. The assassin was a woman. Her silver eyes burned into his as she straightened. You were never supposed to survive, human. Ethan tightened his grip on his weapon. Yeah. Well, I guess I like breaking the rules. Seraphis's voice echoed through his earpiece. Keep her talking. We need more time. Ethan exhaled. So why me? Why does the council want me dead? The Ghostblade's gaze didn't waver. Because you changed everything. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? The assassin's lips curled into a smirk. You don't even realize it, do you? You're more dangerous than you think. Then, she vanished. One moment she was standing there. The next, she was gone. Ethan cursed under his breath. Seraphis's voice came through the earpiece. Ethan, we have a problem. He exhaled. Yeah, I kinda figured. No, it's worse. Ethan's stomach tightened. How much worse? Seraphis's voice was tense. The High Council just declared war on us. Ethan's heart pounded as Seraphis's voice echoed through his earpiece. The High Council just declared war on us. For a moment, the world seemed to slow down. Ethan clenched his fists. Tell me you're joking. Seraphis's voice was tense. I wish I was. Ethan exhaled sharply. This wasn't just an assassination plot anymore. This was a full-scale betrayal. Seraphis continued. The council has mobilized their fleets. They are calling you a dangerous outsider and claiming that my rule has been corrupted. Ethan's jaw tightened. Because of me. Seraphis's tone softened. Because of us. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. The Ghostblade's words came back to him. You changed everything. Now he finally understood. The moment he and Seraphis bonded, it wasn't just a relationship, it was a shift in power. Their child would be the first of its kind, a symbol of unity between humans and the Zirin people. And that terrified the High Council. They didn't want change. They wanted control. Ethan exhaled. We don't have time to sit around. What's the plan? Seraphis' voice hardened. We fight. Preparing for battle. The palace was no longer just a home. It was a fortress. Ethan walked through the command center as warriors suited up for battle. Seraphis' most loyal guards stood ready, their weapons gleaming under the lights. Vela, the informant, stood nearby, scanning through intercepted transmissions. The Council's forces will be here within the hour. Their fleet is larger than ours. Ethan frowned. What about reinforcements? Seraphis shook her head. Most of our allies are hesitant. They fear the Council's power. Ethan exhaled. So it was just them. But then he smirked. They didn't need numbers. They needed strategy. He turned to the warriors. All right, listen up. We might be outnumbered, but that doesn't mean we're outmatched. We fight smart, we fight hard, and we make them regret ever coming here. The warriors roared in agreement. Seraphis stepped beside him. You sound like a war leader. Ethan grinned. Guess I've been learning from the best. The battle begins. The sky darkened as the enemy fleet arrived. Massive warships loomed over the capital, their cannons glowing with deadly energy. Ethan stood beside Seraphis on the palace balcony, watching as the first wave of enemy troops descended. The battle started instantly. Explosions shook the ground, energy bolts lighting up the sky. Ethan and Seraphis led the charge. He fought like a man with nothing to lose. Blasters fired, blades clashed, and warriors fell on both sides. The enemy forces were strong, but they had underestimated Seraphis' army, and they had definitely underestimated Ethan. A Zirin warrior lunged at him, but Ethan dodged, grabbed the alien's arm, and twisted, sending him crashing to the ground. He grabbed a fallen blaster and fired, taking down 2 more. Adrenaline pumped through his veins. Seraphis fought beside him, moving with deadly grace. She was a queen, but she was also a warrior. The battle raged on, but something felt off. Where was the Ghostblade? The assassin returns. Ethan barely had time to react before a shadow moved behind him. The Ghostblade. She struck fast, her blade aimed at his heart. Ethan blocked just in time, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. The assassin's silver eyes burned with determination. You should not be here, human. Ethan smirked. Yeah, I keep hearing that. They fought in the middle of the battlefield, a duel within a war. The Ghostblade was fast, but Ethan had something she didn't, a reason to fight. Blow after blow, he countered her strikes. He wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for Seraphis, for their child, for the future. Finally, he saw his opening. The Ghostblade lunged, and Ethan caught her wrist, twisting her blade from her grip. He pinned her to the ground, breathing hard. It's over. She stared up at him, her expression unreadable. You're different from what I expected. Ethan held her gaze. Join us. Fight with us. For the first time, she hesitated. Then, an explosion shook the battlefield. Seraphis' voice rang out. The Council's forces are retreating. Ethan looked around. The battle was over. They had won. A new beginning. The High Council's forces had fled, their plan to overthrow Seraphis crushed. The palace stood strong. The people rejoiced. Ethan stood beside Seraphis on the balcony, watching the sunrise. She turned to him, her golden eyes soft. You saved my people today. Ethan smiled. We saved them. Together. She placed a hand over her stomach, where their child grew. A symbol of hope, of change. Ethan exhaled. This was just the beginning. The universe would never be the same. The human had changed everything, and he wouldn't have it any other way.